Hi everyone, my name is Satara Moman, a graduate student in the Masters of Health Informatics at George Mason University. Today I'm going to present my Teach 1 assignment for the class of HAP 823 taught by Dr. Ronald F.A. Wuderman for the summer of 2020. For this presentation, I specifically focus on clinician benchmarking, which is for week 6, question 2. The question is, the following data report patients with 10 diagnostic-related groups and 3 HCC indices cared for by a clinician and his peer group. Use SQL to determine if the clinician is more efficient than his peer group. Here is the provided snapshot of the data. We observe there is 5 columns. The first one is the ID, which is the patient identifier. The second column is DRG or diagnostic related groups. The third column is HCC or hierarchical condition category. DRG and HCC are categories in group scoring classification designed by Medicare and Medicaid as part of their quality payment program to measure the clinician's performance. We use these columns to stratify our data. The next column is the doctor column, which is service provider, and here we see there is 2 groups. One is clinician and the other is the peer. And finally, it's LOS or length of stay for each one of the provider and clinician here. After importing the data into SQL Server, the first step is to calculate the pattern of care for the clinician. This code shows that we selected and counted the IDs for the patients cared for by the clinicians. And then we select and use the DRG and HCC to calculate the probability of the patient types being observed by the clinicians. Also, the average length of stay for clinicians is calculated, which is grouped by the patient types. So on the right, we will see the outcome, and we see that is 28 rows that has been affected. Next, we use the same process to calculate the pattern of care for the patient cared for by the peer group. We repeated the same code. However, we used the where command, and instead of clinician, this time we selected the peer group. And as we see on the side, the outcome shows the probability of the patient being cared by the peer group and their length of stay. The next step is matching the clinicians and the peer groups patients on common strata to see what is missing and if any patient type is not having a match in the other group. We observed that 4 types of patients seen by the clinician, however, don't have a peer match. And these are indicated by the null values on the right with the arrow. It doesn't matter if we get a null value for clinician, meaning patient types that's seen by the peers but not have a match by clinicians, since the comparison is done on the clinician's patient, not on the peer patients. So in order to solve this problem, we have to use the synthetic case calculation in order to be able to solve this problem. This approach makes up a new control that has all of the features of an unmatched case. So it uses the regression to predict the outcome for this synthetic control from the patterns among the available controls. Before we use the synthetic calculation to find the missing values, I use this code to find the overlap between the peer and clinician cases without the synthetic cases. And as we see, about 81.48% overlap without the synthetic cases. In the next step, we are calculating peer group's performance if it had clinician patients. And then we are switching the probability of peer group to clinician. For missing outcome, we calculate the synthetic outcomes based on marginal average approach. So we technically take the product of the average average length of stay for each covariant in each provider group, and then divided it by the average length of stay in that particular group. So as we seen, and then we took the average for the entire set, and we select where the provider is actually the peer. So the outcome result is shown in the table on the right, and as we see, the 4 null values that we had in the previous slide is now has a value which is approximately 3.3. And this is how the synthetic cases actually matched and calculated the null values for the peer group. In the next step, I calculated the overlapping between the peer and clinician cases after the synthetic cases were done. And as we've seen, the overlap with synthetic cases is 100%, which means that the matching was done correctly. In the final steps, we are calculating the percent efficiency between the peer and clinician cases. So to calculate the clinician length of stay, we multiply the probability of the patient seeing by the clinician times by the length of stay. And then we're gonna check how would the peers perform if they have seen the clinician patient. And in order to do that, we take the distribution of the clinician, multiplying it by the outcome, which is the length of stay of the peers. And then finally, we calculate the percent efficiency of the clinician as shown here. So to answer the question that was asked, use SQL to determine if the clinician is more efficient than his peer group. We would say yes, the clinician is about 2.78% more efficient than his peer group. In conclusion, benchmarking is a useful technique for comparing the performance metrics using similar type of data. Synthetic controls strategies match the cases using regression to predict the outcome for the synthetic cases. I hope you find my presentation informative, and thank you for listening.